As Indiana Jones faces his final adventure in Dial of Destiny, we figured this was a great time to take all of his live-action adventures and lay them all down on a handy timeline. Yeah, I know, there's comics and games too, but come on, who has time for all that? Alright, let's get to it. Here's the almost complete Indiana Jones timeline. Henry Indiana Jones Jr. was born in 1899 in Princeton, New Jersey to Dr. Henry and Anna Jones. His adventures really began when he and his mother accompanied his father on a lecture tour that started in London in May of 1908 and took them around the world until 1910. This amazing journey would put the Junior Jones at the foot of actual history and in the company of some legendary figures, and that all began in Egypt in May of 1908 when he and his new tutor, Helen Seymour, found themselves camping at the foot of the Great Pyramids in Giza with T.E. Lawrence, you know, the guy who history would remember as Lawrence of Arabia. It was during this campout that Lawrence described opening up a tomb, and young Indy first professed his desire to become an archaeologist. Later on this trip, they would help famed archaeologist Howard Carter, the man who would discover the tomb of old King Tut, to solve a murder mystery at the dig site of the tomb of an ancient Egyptian engineer named Ka. Next, Indy found himself in Paris, witnessing a debate about the new and old styles of art and artists between a young Pablo Picasso, Georges Braque, and Edgar Degas. All this while hanging around his new friend, a young Norman Rockwell. The night would spiral out of control and involve scandalous parties and a plan to trick Degas into a faked piece of his own art. What a boob. Indiana found himself smitten with a young princess named Sophie, the daughter of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, in Vienna in November of 1908. Needing some love advice, the young burgeoning heartbreaker gets advice from no less than Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and Alfred Adler. Alas, her father, a man destined to play a larger part in the world's history if you remember your high school history class, admired the young romantic but refused Indy's offer to marry. As a parting gift, Sophie gave him a locket with her photo in it, something he held on to for good luck for years to come. From love in Europe to the thrill of a safari, Indy then found himself in British East Africa, now called Kenya, in September of 1909. The safari is being led by former President Teddy Roosevelt, who's been tasked with gathering specimens of animals for the Smithsonian Institute, along with famed big game hunter Frederick Selous. In the Russian countryside, Indy would meet and temporarily run away with War and Peace author Leo Tolstoy, discuss philosophy with author Nikos Kazantzakis, and learn about meditation in India while exploring the divine through the lenses of many faiths. The lecture tour was beginning to wind down, and Indy found himself seeing the Great Wall of China while in Peking, China in late 1910. While here, Indy came down with typhoid fever, bummer, and he and his mother were taken in by a poor Chinese family who helped him recover. And with that, plus an adventure with Harry Houdini in Australia, you know, no big deal.
It was great. Actually, I flew an airplane with Harry Houdini.
Strife.
He's pulling your leg.
Ah, yeah.
No, it's true.
The lecture tour comes to an end, and the Jones family returns to America and home to Princeton, New Jersey. In May of 1912, Anna Jones, Indy's beloved mother, passed away due to the effects of scarlet fever. With tensions already present between father and son, especially with Dr. Jones' growing obsession with the Holy Grail, their relationship only grew more strained following her death. Later that year, Dr. Jones accepted a new teaching position at Four Corners University, and he and his increasingly restless son moved to Moab, Utah. It was there that Indiana became involved with the Boy Scouts, and on one particular overnight trip with the Scouts, Indy went off trail and found a band of thieves removing the Cross of Coronado from a cave. Refusing to let this important artifact fall into the wrong hands, the burgeoning archaeologist and adventurer stole the item from them, and an epic chase followed. Turns out the thieves were working with some more powerful allies, and the Cross of Coronado is taken back by a rugged man who kinda looks like a multiverse Indiana Jones. He tells him, "You lost today, kid, but you don't have to like it," before giving Indy his own brown fedora hat. A February 1916 adventure back in Princeton found Indy embroiled in a caper involving Thomas Edison, designs for an electric car, and Big Oil going to criminal lengths to stop it. All because Indy needed his fancy Bugatti repaired in time for prom. But his hometown was becoming too small for the wide-eyed Indy, and he went to visit his cousin Frank in New Mexico. While on the visit, Indy is taken captive by Mexican revolutionary Pancho Villa, and inspired by him, Indy joins his cause and joins the Mexican Revolution. During his time, he meets Remy Boudoir, a Belgian national who had settled in Mexico and joined the rebellion. While watching some silent movies with the rebels, a newsreel played, and both Indy and Remy saw the carnage taking place in the Great War happening in Europe. Affected by the damage being done to his homeland, Remy vowed to go to Europe and join the fight, and Indy decided to join him and fight for the Belgian army in World War I. In London, to officially join the Belgian army in May 1916, Indy meets and falls for Vicky Prentice and becomes a supporter of women's suffrage through her words and work for it, an issue Vicky debates with the younger Winston Churchill. The two fall in love, but Indy and Remy's call-up papers arrive and it's time to go fight in the war to end all wars. This takes us to August 1916 when Indy, fighting under the name Henry Defense, yeah, real clever, because he was technically too young to join the army, finds himself in a hellish fight at Flanders Field on the Western Front. With all of his commanders killed in action, Indy takes over the 9th Belgian Infantry. This leads to the unit being absorbed by the French 14th Company, and Indiana Jones experiences the nightmare that was the Battle of the Somme. From there, Indy continues to fight while also learning more of the plight of soldiers from poets Siegfried Sassoon and Robert Graves. He also escapes the dreaded Dusterstadt prison with Charles de Gaulle and serves as a motorcycle courier for the French military. During an October leave in Paris, Indy has a love affair with dancer Mata Hari, accused and later executed for being a spy for the Germans. Indy and Remy transferred from the Western Front, feeling the effects of the brutal trench warfare, to the African theater as lieutenants in the Belgian army. This reunites Indy with Frederick Sellis some 7 years after their time with Teddy Roosevelt, as Sellis, now a captain in the army, leads the hunt for the Germans' infamous Phantom train, a rail-mounted gun spreading fear and carnage across the land. With the plan that was made up as they went along, the train was destroyed by Sellis' unit known as the Old and the Bold, which also sounds like a soap opera about a nursing home. As the war stretched into 1917, Indy had experiences with famed Dr. Albert Schweitzer, was shot down in an aerial dogfight by Manfred von Richthofen in the famous Red Baron, and tried to convince the Flying Dutchman Anthony Fokker, whose descendant would become Greg Fokker from Meet the Parents, don't Google that, just trust me,
Bomb, 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 bomb,
to keep his new weapons tech out of the Germans' hands so they couldn't gain air superiority in the war. Not stopping there, Indy spends time in Barcelona posing as a Russian ballet dancer and meets novelist Franz Kafka while working as a spy. By October 1917, Indy is in Palestine alongside his old pal, T.A. Lawrence, now a major in the English army, as they help the Australian Light Horseman Regiment break the Turkish lines at Gaza in the Battle of Beersheba. Indy would next join the French Foreign Legion and would find time for love in northern Italy as he pursued an enchanting Italian girl named Julieta. Unfortunately, someone else was competing for her hand, and Indy found himself complaining about this to his new friend Ernie. Ernie vowed to help Indy win the heart of this girl, but eventually both Indy and Ernie find out they're competing against each other, and Ernie is, of course, Ernest Hemingway. While arguing about the situation, both Hemingway and Indiana are wounded in action when German planes bomb the area. The war raged on in 1918, and Indy found himself facing off against Vlad the Impaler and his army of the living dead in Transylvania, and uncovering a Turkish plot to kill French spies. One of his later adventures in 1935 connects to his time in New Guinea in March of 1919. Once again with his old buddy Remy, Indy searches for the Peacock's Eye, a valuable diamond once owned by Alexander the Great that will pop up later in Indy's adventures, so don't forget it. But before we get there, let's go back a bit. Indy and Remy were tracking a corporal named Mahendra Singh, who was reportedly trading information with the Germans. This had sent them back to the trenches of the Western Front. They chased their target to no man's land, where they approach Singh and find him clutching a map written in ancient Greek. Singh keeps repeating the Eye of the Peacock, which is kind of like the Eye of the Tiger, but not as catchy. It's at this moment a ceasefire whistle blows. It's November 1918, and after 4 years, this means that World War I has come to an end with Germany's surrender. Indiana and Remy return to London, where Indy learns his former tutor, Miss Seymour, has passed away. She left Indy a letter in which she told him to make peace with his father and make something of his life. This sends Indy and Remy on the search for the Peacock's Eye. The wild adventure is truly one of Indy's first treasure hunting adventures, and it finds him squaring off with pirates, chasing down clues, and being held captive by tribal headhunters. He is rescued by anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski, and Indiana Jones gives up the pursuit of the Peacock's Eye and parts ways with Remy to return home to the United States for the first time in years. Before leaving, Indy works as a translator at the Paris Peace Conference, meeting up with T.E. Lawrence once more and witnessing the Treaty of Versailles. While there, he and Lawrence talk with Arnold Toynbee and Gertrude Bell. Toynbee warns that the demands being placed on Germany will lead to another war, but Indy's just relieved that the war is over. But Toynbee fears it is just the beginning. And with that, Indiana Jones returns home to Princeton. Though they try to reconcile, Indiana and his father just can't find a way to heal the old wounds. Indiana leaves for Chicago to finally begin his studies at the University of Chicago under the tutelage of Professor Abner Ravenwood. The year is 1920. While in Chicago, Indy is struggling to get along with his college dorm mate, a straight-laced kid named Elliot Ness, the same Ness that would go on to battle the mob and enforce prohibition in Chicago. During this time, Indy now works at a restaurant owned by Big Jim Colosimo. Colosimo is murdered, and Indy, Ness, and the returning Ernest Hemingway, that sounds like a Mad Lib, work to solve the murder. This takes them into the murky waters of the Chicago mob scene. They soon deduce that the murder was tied to a bartender named Big Al Brown, known to the world as Al Capone. Still studying archaeology, Indy then spends some time in New York for the summer, working as a stagehand for George White's Broadway play Scandals. Here he befriends George Gershwin and gets to attend the famed Algonquin Round Table with the likes of Dorothy Parker and critic Alexander Woollcott. It's during this time that Gershwin introduces Indy to Carl Laemmle, who sends Indy out west to work in pictures, and shut down the budget-busting production Foolish Wives by Erich von Stroheim. The experience leaves him dismayed by the politics of the emerging Hollywood studios, which, spoiler, is still a mess 100 years later. While not quite the high adventure that Indiana would soon be known for, it proves important in the long run. While taking a job with John Ford to make enough money to return to Chicago, Indy ends up being an actor in Ford's latest Western. Getting gunslinging tips from Wyatt Earp, Indy also has to learn a big stunt, and those skills will come in handy some 16-odd years later. With that, Indy is back in Chicago studying under Ravenwood. By 1925, he's teaching at Marshall College and breaks the heart of the probably too young woman he loves, Marion Ravenwood. In 1935, Indiana Jones works for crime lord Lao Che to retrieve the ashes of the last emperor of the Manchu dynasty. In exchange, Lao Che promises to give Indy the Peacock Eye Diamond. Remember, I told you that was going to be important. He's been searching for that since 1919. During a performance by singer Willie Scott, Jones finds himself sitting with Lao Che and his sons, and the situation quickly escalates when Indy drinks poisoned champagne and Lao Che demands the diamond in exchange for the antidote. Chaos ensues as Indy and Willie manage to grab the antidote, escape the club, jump into a car driven by Short Round, and head to the airport to catch a cargo plane. But unfortunately, that cargo plane belonged to Lao Che. Womp womp.
Nice try, Lao Che!
Pilots abandoned the plane, causing Indy, Willie, and Short Round to jump out of a life raft, tumbling through the sky, and eventually landing in a river in India. They were guided to a small village in Mayapur. Indy, longing to return to his professorship, agreed to help the villagers reach Delhi, but first they had to stop at Pankot Palace. The village was in a dire state, lacking food, water, and eerily without any children. The villagers explained that the desolation and theft were caused by the resurgence of the Thuggee cult at Pankot Palace, who had taken the children and resources. This troubled Indy, but he became intrigued when he discovered that one of the stolen items was a Sankara stone. According to legend, the stones were meant to combat evil given by the god Shiva to High Priest Sankara. The prospect of finding these stones enticed Indy with the promise of fortune and glory, leading him to agree to help. Upon their arrival at the palace, Prime Minister Chitarle welcomed them along with Captain Blumbird and a contingent of the British Army. During a dinner intended to divert attention from the true nature of the palace, Indy confronted Prime Minister Lay about the resurgence of the Thuggee cult. Despite Indy's claim of being informed about their active presence, Lay and even the young leader Maharaj Zalim Singh vehemently denied it, despite their own involvement and enjoyment of the cult's privileges and power. That night, Indy flirted with Willie Scott and battled an assassin, uncovering a secret passage to the cult's prison in the palace. There, they witnessed a gruesome sacrificial ritual led by the cult's leader, Mullah Ram. After the ceremony, Indy goes down to collect the stones, but is captured just as he hears the screams of children that pull him back from his pursuit of fortune and glory. Willie Scott and Short Round are captured as well. Mullah Ram explains his plan to take over the world with the power of Sankara stones and puts Indy under the Black Sleep, a brainwashing spell. Short Round is placed with the enslaved children, while Willie is chosen for sacrifice with Indy still under the spell. However, Short Round escapes and helps Indy break free by using fire to dispel the effects of the Black Sleep. They get into a crazy fight and escape in a thrilling mining cart chase, and eventually they find themselves in a precarious suspension bridge trapped between two groups of cultists. Indy makes a daring decision to cut the bridge, sending everyone, including cultists, plummeting into the river infested with crocodiles. Mullah Ram and Indy fight for their lives and control the stones, but Indy enchants in Sanskrit, and the stones, reacting to the fact that Mullah Ram has not followed Shiva's mandate to battle evil, burn in Mullah Ram's hands. Indy returns the final stone back to the village, understanding its true meaning and power as the children run home to the embraces of their families. It's now 1936. Indy encounters his rival Belloc while pursuing the Golden Idol in Peru. With the help of his pal Jock and his pet snake Reggie, they escape in a plane and return to Marshall College. There, Indy is approached by government agents Musgrove and Eaton. Hey look, it's Porkins! Man, that guy gets terrible character names. Who need his expertise in deciphering a Nazi message. The message reveals a search for the headpiece of the Staff of Ra and an archaeological dig in Tanis, linked to Indy's former mentor, Abner Ravenwood. Quickly, Indy and Brody realize that the Nazis are dangerously close to locating the powerful Lost Ark of the Covenant. Indy's on the case. Indy first heads to Abner's last known location, Nepal. There, Indy finds his old flame, Marion Ravenwood, still angry at the heartbreaking Indiana Jones. He's sorry for his mistakes, but that doesn't quite cut it for Marion. Indy just wants the headpiece, but Marion denies having it. However, when Nazi henchman Tote and his goons threaten Marion, Indy comes to her aid. In the chaos of the bar being set ablaze, Marion confesses that she does possess the headpiece and declares herself Indy's partner in their quest. Excuse me. Your goddamn partner! Next, Indy and Marion go to Cairo and meet his old pal Sala. Here they discover the Nazis' collaboration with Belloc in the search for the Ark's location. In a confrontation, Marion is believed to be killed. Indy and Belloc engage in a deep philosophical chat about values right before they are saved by Sala's children. Soon, Indy and Sala realize the Nazis lack crucial information and are digging in the wrong place. They go to the map room and with the actual headpiece discover where to dig for the Ark, the Well of Souls, woo, scary, which they do as storms gather that night. Indy discovers Marion is alive in Belloc's tent but decides to leave her to maintain their cover. Indy and Sala successfully locate the Ark and prepare to lift it to safety. However, Belloc and the Nazis arrive, taking the Ark and throwing Marion and Indy into the Well of Souls. They manage to escape and confront a German strongman with a heavy resemblance to the thuggy strongman. Wonder what that's about. He just fought last year. The strongman faces a gruesome death by the propellers of the German advanced aircraft while Indy rescues Marion from the plane's cockpit seconds before it explodes. Now the Nazis are going to have to get the Ark out of here by truck. Using the skills acquired during his stint as a stuntman in 1920, Jones overtakes the Nazis and the truck, taking possession of the Ark. Sala helps Indy and Marion escape on the freighter Bantu Wind with the Ark. However, the Nazis catch up to them on a U-boat and reclaim the Ark and Marion. They head to a secret island base for the Ark's examination before showcasing it to Hitler. Indy manages to infiltrate the base despite not quite fitting into the first Nazi uniform, and confronts Belloc and the Nazis as they transport the Ark. Despite hesitating to destroy it, Indy is captured once again. Tied to a pole with Marion while the Nazis begin their test, Indy has them both close their eyes and not stare directly at the power of God found within the Ark. The Nazis do though, and everyone meets a fantastic, fiery, wrathful end. That face is melting like ice cream. The Ark, Indy, and Marion all return to America where the government promptly stores the Ark in a box, placing it among thousands of other boxes in an undisclosed warehouse that we're gonna see again a little later. Indy is upset because they don't know the value of what they have, but Marion knows the value of what she has, Indy, and they seem set to live happily ever after. Except not quite yet. We jump to the year 1938 when Indiana Jones completes his latest mission, recovering the Cross of Coronado from the Panama hat-wearing man that was behind Indy's encounter with the thieves in 1912. Returning with the cross to his job at Barnett College and his old pal Marcus Brody, Indy is soon pulled into another adventure, the search for the Holy Grail. Indy is approached by Walter Donovan, who shows him important artifacts related to the Grail. Donovan wants Indy to continue the quest as the previous researcher, his father, is missing. This leads Indy and Marcus Brody to investigate his dad's now ransacked home. Indy receives a package containing his father's Grail diary from Venice, which contains a lifetime of research including maps and clues. Indy and Brody take 2 tickets and head to Venice, Italy to meet Donovan's other hired hand, Dr. Elsa Schneider. They start their adventure by following his father's trail to an ancient church library. Inside, they discover that his father was not searching for information about the tomb of Sir Richard, but rather the tomb itself. Excited, Indy leads Elsa into the catacombs where they find Sir Richard's tomb and examine the markings on the shield. However, their presence attracts the attention of Cosm and the Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword, who set fire to the catacombs. Indy and Elsa manage to escape, but are pursued by the Brotherhood in boats. Cosm reveals that the Brotherhood exists to protect the Grail from ever being discovered. Indy assures him that he's looking for his father, not the Holy Grail. And with that assurance, Cosm tells him that Dr. Jones is being held in Castle Brunwald on the German-Austrian border. Using the information obtained from Sir Richard's tomb and his father's diary, Indy and Brody determine that the Grail is in the canyon of the Crescent Moon, specifically in the ancient city of Alexandretta. Time to rescue Indy's papa. Indy successfully rescues his dad from Castle Brunwald, but their plan is derailed when Elsa, who's working for the Nazis, steals the Grail diary. It is revealed that Walter Donovan is also in league with the Nazis. However, Elsa discovers that the crucial pages from the diary are missing, and Indy confidently asserts that it's too late for the Nazis. Marcus Brody has a head start and will soon possess the Grail.
Does anyone here speak English?
But really, Brody's then promptly kidnapped by the Nazis, while old pal Sala tries in vain to protect him. No longer needed, Indy and his father are left tied up to be killed by the Nazis, but they manage to escape through the burning castle on a motorcycle. Dr. Jones demands that they go to Berlin to recover the Grail diary, because in it are the clues to surviving 3 tests that they will find once they reach the Grail location. Indy doesn't want to, but his father has spoken, and it's off to the heart of the Nazi army. There, disguised Indy confronts Elsa at a book-burning ceremony and recovers the diary. While leaving, he's pushed into Adolf Hitler as he marches through the crowd. Thinking the soldier is just a really big fan, Hitler signs the very diary his henchmen are looking for. Indy and his father enjoy a brief moment of calm on a Zeppelin, but their escape is interrupted when the Nazis force the airship to turn back. However, they manage to flee in an airplane and join forces with Sala. During their mission to rescue Marcus Brody, Dr. Jones is captured and trapped inside a tank. With the help of the Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword, Indy manages to rescue his father and Brody, fight off Colonel Vogel, and narrowly avoid a fiery, crashing death on the tank. Vogel does not quite avoid this. Donovan, Dr. Schneider, and the rest of the Nazis reach the Canyon of the Crescent Moon, but failed to pass the first test. Sala, Brody, and Indy are captured and brought before Donovan. To force Indy to find the Grail, Donovan shoots his father in the stomach. In a desperate attempt to save his father's life, Indy embarks on the first test guided by his dying father's instructions. He successfully navigates the Breath of God and reaches the Chamber of the Grail, where he encounters the Ancient Knight. Donovan and Elsa arrive, and it's time for Donovan to claim his prize, everlasting life, if he drinks the holy water from the Grail. Of course, Donovan chooses the wrong Grail and dies a pretty gruesome death.
He chose poorly.
Elsa intentionally picked the wrong cup, but Indy finds the correct one, a humble cup that would belong to the son of a carpenter. Indy drinks from the Grail and is confirmed by the knight to have chosen wisely. He and Elsa return with the Grail's water to heal Dr. Jones. However, Elsa's greed leads her to take the Grail past the temple's seal, which is a big ol' no-no, causing the temple to collapse. Elsa falls to her death, and Indy's about to do the same, but is guided by his father to just let go. Indy lets go of the fortune and glory the Grail would bring, and more importantly, lets go of the years of hurt and resentment he harbored for his father. Indy, Dr. Jones, Marcus Brody, and Sala ride off into the sunset. And that, it seemed, was the final adventure of Indiana Jones. Psych! Of course there are more adventures to be had. We know sometime in the early 1940s, Indy unsuccessfully tries to go for Archimedes' Antikythera on a mission aboard a high-speed train. And in 1950, a bearded Indy catches up with his old friend Gray Cloud in Wyoming, and during some downtime in their adventure, Indy finds a saxophone that sends him down memory lane to his college days and how he learned to play the blues in Chicago around 1920. From there, we fast forward to 1957, where we catch up with Indy and his old British intelligence officer buddy, George Mac McHale, as they are captives of the Russian army in the Nevada desert. The Russians, led by Irina Spalko, aim to infiltrate Area 51, where the Lost Ark of the Covenant is housed. See, I told you it would come back. However, their true objective is the remains of an alien spacecraft from the 1947 Roswell crash. Indy had been part of the team that investigated the crash and those remains. Indy locates the magnetic remains, has his buddy Mac revealed to be working for the Russians, and escapes in a wild fight that Indy just might be too old for now. Finding himself in a fake town that is about to be demolished in a nuclear test site, Indy survives the blast by hiding in a lead-lined refrigerator. This might seem a little far-fetched if Indy hadn't been the same guy that jumped out of a freaking plane with a raft, but hey, who's counting? Indy, suspected of being a Russian and communist co-conspirator, is captured by the FBI and under constant surveillance. He then loses his job as a professor at Marshall College when the FBI raids his office. Seeking new opportunities, Indy prepares to leave when he is approached by a young greaser on a motorcycle named Mutt, who delivers a message from Mary, Mutt's mother. Mary informs Indy that their old classmate Harold Oxley has gone missing while searching for the Crystal Skull of Akator. Indy, enticed by one more adventure, agrees to find Oxley and Mutt's mother. Russians find them first though, and Mutt and Indy have to fight their way out of the encounter. At Indy's home, Indy explains the Crystal Skulls to Mutt and deciphers the cryptic message from Oxley. Time to go back to Peru, baby. In Nazca, Indy and Mutt discover the location of the Crystal Skull, fight off Nazca warriors trying to protect it, and recover the skull, just in time for the Russians to capture them. At the Russian camp, Irina tries to unlock the skull's powers, but she can't. She tries to force Indy to do it by threatening Mutt and then Mutt's mother, who's revealed to be none other than Marion Ravenwood. They all escape thanks to Mutt, for now, and Indy soon learns that Mutt is Henry Jones III. Yep, that's his son. Indy's very identity as a rogue archaeologist, professor, adventurer, and experienced bachelor keeps getting challenged. The Russians capture them again, and with the Crystal Skull in tow, head to the location of the lost city of El Dorado, thanks to the information deciphered from Harold Oxley's ramblings. Never one to just stay captured, Indy leads the charge as Mutt, Marion, and now, back on their side, Mac, escape the clutches of the Russians. This all leads to the Temple of Akator. With Russians in hot pursuit, finding their way into it, the crew discovers 13 skeletons belonging to interdimensional beings that had come to Earth and had the natives there build the city for them. One of the skeletons is missing a skull, which just happens to be the one Irina Spalko has. She places the skull in the last skeleton, and the 13 skeletons combine to form one living being. Spalko asks for the gift of knowledge, but the being senses her malicious intent to use that power to control the world and overwhelms her brain with all the knowledge she could want, and she combusts. Kinda cool. This opens a portal, and her remains and the rest of the Russians are sucked up, not unlike the Nazis who encountered the Ark all those years ago on the island near Crete. As the temple begins to collapse and reveal a flying saucer that is set to take the interdimensional beings home, Indy, Mutt, Oxley, and Marion escape. Indy heads back to Bedford, where he returns to teaching at Marshall College with the new title of Associate Dean, and he finally marries Marion Ravenwood. Finally, they can live happily ever after. For now. So what do we know from this point? Well, fast forward to 1969. We know that one of Indy's last adventures will take him on the quest for Archimedes' Antikythera, aka the Dial of Destiny. That's the one he's been trying to get since all the way back in the 40s. From there, we know that Indiana Jones was last known to be living in upstate New York and was alive as late as 1993. A grandfather to 3 and somehow missing an eyeball, Indy would still travel and lecture along the way, telling the tales of his adventures to those that needed to hear them. And that's the complete adventures of Indiana Jones, all the way through to being an old grandpa telling stories.